I came home from deployment to a locked door and a text. Don't bother coming. 2 words back, and the clock started ticking. 48 hours later, her lawyer was screaming. Her boyfriend was ex-military and thought I was just a soldier. He had no idea what I'd already put in motion while he was sleeping in my bed. My name is Curtis Stringer. I'm 44 years old. I spent the better part of 2 decades as a Navy SEAL, running operations in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. I've been in situations where one wrong move meant you didn't come home at all. I know how to stay calm when everything around me is falling apart. I know how to read a situation, assess the threat, and execute with precision. What I didn't know, what I completely failed to see, was that the most dangerous operation of my life was waiting for me not in some foreign desert, but in the quiet suburb of Virginia Beach where I'd built my life. I landed at Norfolk Naval Station on a Tuesday morning in late October. The air had that sharp edge that comes with the first real cold snap of the season. Leaves turning, sky gray, everything carrying that smell of wood smoke and wet pavement. I've been gone 8 months. 8 months of radio silence, brief encrypted messages, and 2 video calls that felt more like debriefs than conversations with my wife. I reached for my phone the moment I was clear of the terminal. I expected something from Naomi, a time she picked me up, maybe a text saying the kids were excited to see me. Colton was 19 now, home between semesters. Isla was 17, sharp as a tack, and never one to hide her feelings. What I got instead stopped me cold. The locks have been changed. Don't bother coming to the house. It's over. The kids know. I read it twice. Then a third time. Around me, other guys were getting bear hugs from wives and girlfriends, kids running across the tarmac, people crying happy tears. I just stood there with the phone in my hand, the crowd moving around me like water around a stone. A dozen responses ran through my head. Anger, demands, questions, pleading. I typed 2 words, as you wish. Anyone who knew me understood what that meant. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't indifference. It was the calm before a very deliberate storm. In the teams, I'd earned a reputation for going completely quiet right before a complex operation. The quieter I got, the more focused I became. Naomi had seen that stillness exactly once before, when a contractor tried to defraud us on the house renovation 3 years ago. That man ended up repaying every cent plus damages. She should have remembered that. I didn't call her back. I didn't try to reach the kids. Instead, I picked up my duffel, walked to the cab line, and made 1 phone call. Lorraine Stokes. Lorraine, it's Curtis Stringer. I need you today. A brief pause. Then her voice shifted into that crisp, business-like register I'd come to trust. How soon can you be at my office? 45 minutes. I'll have coffee waiting. Lorraine Stokes was one of the most respected family law attorneys in Virginia Beach, and one of the most feared. She had a way of walking into a courtroom that made opposing counsel visibly recalibrate. I'd gotten her name from a fellow SEAL whose divorce had nearly buried him financially before Lorraine turned the whole thing around in 60 days. I'd stored her number in my phone 2 years ago, during a particularly bad stretch of Naomi silences. I'd hoped I'd never use it. Her office was on the 14th floor of a downtown high-rise, all clean lines and polished surfaces. She was already standing when I walked in, taking in my uniform, my expression, the set of my jaw. Tell me everything, she said, sliding a coffee across the desk. I talked for 20 minutes straight. The deployment, the text, the 2 words I'd sent back. She listened without interrupting, making small notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she set her pen down. You've been planning for this possibility. I've been hoping against it, I said. But yes. She studied me. Most men in your position want to know if they can save the marriage. I want to know what my options are, I told her. And I want to know them before she realizes I'm already 3 moves ahead. Lorraine allowed herself a small, tight smile. Then let's get to work. By the time I left her office 2 hours later, a series of legal and financial actions had been set in motion, timed, sequenced, and precise. Outside, I pulled out my phone and made a second call, this one to Boyd Carver, a private investigator I'd used once before for a background check on a tenant at a rental property I owned. Boyd, I need eyes on my house. Starting tonight. How long you been back? 4 hours. A low whistle. That bad. Possibly worse, I said. I need to know who's coming and going. Names, plates, times. Everything. I'll have something for you by morning. I checked into a hotel, near the waterfront, and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the wall. The room was quiet. Outside, the harbor lights reflected off the dark water. I thought about Colton and Isla. I thought about the text. I thought about what Naomi had said to the kids. They know, and what exactly that meant. Then I put the phone face down on the nightstand, lay back, and closed my eyes. I had work to do, and I always slept well before an operation. Boyd Carver called at 6:47 in the morning. I was already up, dressed, sitting at the small desk by the window with a cup of bad hotel coffee and a legal pad full of notes. "You're not going to like this," he opened with. "I didn't expect to," I said. "Go ahead." Boyd had been watching the house since just after midnight. At 9:14 p.m. the previous evening, before he'd even set up, a silver Audi Q7 had pulled into my driveway. The driver was male, mid-40s, well-dressed even at that hour. He'd walked to the front door without hesitating. Naomi had opened it before he knocked. "He stayed 4 hours," Boyd said. "Left at 1 in the morning. I ran the plates. Vehicle is registered to a Wade Phillips. Age 46. Listed address is a condo in Chesapeake." I wrote the name down and underlined it. "How comfortable do they look together?" I asked. "Like people who've been doing this a long time," Boyd replied. "No nervousness, no looking around. Completely at ease." That told me everything I needed to know about the timeline. This wasn't a recent development. This had been going on while I was 8 months overseas, running operations and trusting that my family was intact. "I need everything on Phillips," I told him. "Employment, finances, prior relationships. Whatever you can find. Already started. I'll have a full profile by end of day." I sat with the name for a moment after hanging up. "Wade Phillips." I said it aloud once, the way you repeat a call sign to make it real. Then I flipped to a fresh page on the legal pad and started mapping out my next moves. At 9 a.m., Lorraine's paralegal called to confirm that the first wave of legal actions had been filed: a formal notice of contested divorce, a motion to freeze joint financial accounts pending asset disclosure, and a lien flag on the property to prevent any sale or transfer without court approval. Clean, quiet, and already in motion before Naomi had poured her first cup of coffee. The response came faster than I expected. My phone rang at 10:23 a.m., unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message that followed lasted 47 seconds and featured a man identifying himself as Raymond Bolt, attorney representing Naomi Stringer, who informed me in a voice climbing steadily toward a shout that I had, and I'm paraphrasing here, absolutely no legal right to freeze those accounts, that my actions constituted financial harassment, and that he intended to have every filing reversed by end of business. I forwarded the voicemail to Lorraine without comment. She called back in 10 minutes, sounding almost amused. "He's loud," she observed. "He's scared," I said. Loud and scared are usually the same thing. The freeze holds. His motion to reverse will take at least 2 weeks to be heard, by which time we'll have full financial disclosure on record. He knows that. That's why he's shouting. She paused. "You should know Naomi called the family accounts hotline this morning trying to move funds." The flag stopped it. I felt something settle in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly, more like the solid click of a mechanism engaging properly. "Good," I said. That afternoon, Boyd delivered his preliminary report on Wade Phillips in person, sliding a manila folder across the coffee shop table between us. I opened it and read without speaking. Phillips ran a mid-sized private security consulting firm with federal contracts. Clean record on the surface. But Boyd had dug into his personal history and found something that made my jaw tighten. 2 prior relationships with women whose husbands were either deployed or traveling extensively for work. One ended in a messy divorce that left the woman financially diminished. The other had quietly dissolved with no public record. In both cases, Phillips had moved on without consequence. "He's done this before," I said. "Looks that way," Boyd confirmed. "And there's one more thing." He tapped a page near the back of the folder. "He's currently seeing someone else on the side. Woman named Tara Whitlock. Age 38. Her husband is Staff Sergeant Ray Whitlock, currently deployed to the Middle East." I set the folder down. 2 women. 2 absent husbands. One man running the same play twice simultaneously, and apparently not for the first time. "I want Tara Whitlock's contact information," I said quietly. "But don't approach her yet. Not until I'm ready." Boyd nodded. I drove back to the hotel as the sun was going down, the sky over the harbor turning that deep bruised orange that comes before a cold night. I thought about Ray Whitlock somewhere overseas. No idea what was happening at home. I thought about my own kids, Colton, Isla, and what Naomi had told them. They know. I was going to find out exactly what that meant. I opened my laptop and pulled up a search for Wade Phillips. The quiet before an operation never lasted long. Boyd's full report on Wade Phillips arrived at noon the following day, and it was worse than I'd expected. Phillips hadn't always run a security consulting firm. 12 years ago, he'd worked as a private military contractor, overseas logistics and personnel management for a defense subcontractor out of Tampa. He'd been let go after an internal audit flagged irregularities in billing, inflated invoices, ghost personnel on the payroll, funds routed to shell accounts. No criminal charges were filed. The company settled quietly to avoid the publicity, and Phillips walked away, regrouped, rebranded, and rebuilt. I sat with that for a long moment. A man who'd stolen from his employer, faced no real consequences, and moved on to find easier targets. Military wives. Women whose husbands were gone for months at a time, navigating everything alone, vulnerable in ways that were invisible until someone decided to exploit them. That evening, Boyd confirmed what I already suspected about Naomi's Instagram account, something I hadn't looked at in months because I didn't use social media during deployments. I pulled it up on my phone and felt my stomach turn. The account had over 6,000 followers. The bio read, Navy wife, raising our kids, waiting for him to come home. Post after post, carefully curated. Naomi at community events, photos of Isla at school plays, Colton at his college orientation, captions full of phrases like missing my sailor and grateful for this military family community. Donations links in 3 posts, labeled as fundraisers for military spouse support groups. I clicked through. Combined, they brought in over $4,000. She'd been performing loyalty for strangers on the internet, while Phillips was parking his Audi in my driveway. I closed the app and set the phone face down on the desk. The next morning, I drove to the athletic complex at Virginia Wesleyan, where Colton trained with a club lacrosse group on Thursday mornings. I hadn't announced I was coming. I parked where I could see the entrance and waited. When Colton came through the doors, duffel over one shoulder, he saw me immediately. He stopped. His expression ran through surprise, confusion, and something that looked painfully close to relief before he put a wall up over all of it. Dad. His voice was flat, careful. Hey, son. I kept my tone easy, giving him room. You look good. He walked over slowly, like he wasn't sure of the ground between us. Mom said you weren't coming back, that you decided a clean break was better. He met my eyes. She said you didn't want to see us. The words landed like a fist. I kept my face neutral. That's not true, I said. Not one word of it. Something shifted in Colton's expression, a tightening around the jaw, the look of a young man recalibrating something he'd built his anger around. Then why weren't you here? You've been back 4 days. I had to get some things in order first. Legal things. I paused. I needed to make sure I could actually be part of your life before I made promises about it. He stared at the pavement for a moment, then nodded once, slow, reluctant but real. Isla's been asking about you. She acts like she's not, but she has been. I know, I said. I'm going to fix this, Colton. Both of you. He looked up. What about Phillips? The name in his mouth made my jaw tighten, but I kept it off my face. What do you know about him? Enough. His tone carried a disgust that was older than his years. He acts like he's doing us a favor, like we're supposed to be grateful. Isla's better at hiding it than I am, but she doesn't like him either. That was worth knowing. I filed it carefully. When Naomi's SUV turned into the lot, I stood, made eye contact with my son, and said quietly, whatever happens, I'm your father. That part doesn't change. As I walked to my car, Colton called after me. Dad, are you going to let him just take everything? I turned back once. No, I said. I'm not. The leak revealed itself on a Friday. I told Derek Marsh, my closest friend for 20 years, the man who'd been best man at my wedding and godfather to Isla, that I was planning to request an emergency court hearing to contest the property sale. I told no one else. By Saturday morning, Lorraine called to tell me that Naomi's attorney had filed a preemptive motion addressing exactly that point. The only way Bolt could have known was if someone had told him. I sat with that knowledge for a full day before I acted on it. Not because I doubted it, but because I wanted to be certain. I ran a second test, told Derek I was planning to withdraw from contesting the house altogether, that I decided it wasn't worth the fight. I made it sound tired and resigned, the kind of thing a man says when he's running out of steam. 48 hours later, Lorraine reported that Naomi's legal team had suddenly pulled back on several aggressive filings, apparently confident the pressure was working. That confirmed it completely. Derek was feeding information directly to Naomi, or to Phillips, or to both. I didn't confront him. I went quiet instead, the way I did in the field when I identified a threat, and chose to surveil rather than engage. Derek would continue thinking he had access to my plans. What he'd actually have, from that point forward, was whatever I chose to feed him. The call from Isla came that same evening, unexpected. She got my number from Colton. Dad. Her voice was low, like she was talking from her room with the door closed. Mom doesn't know I'm calling. I figured, I said. I'm glad you did. A pause. Then, I have something you need to see. I've been keeping notes. On my phone. Dates and times. Every time he was at the house. Every time he stayed over. Arguments I heard. All of it. Since last December. Her voice steadied as she spoke, the nervousness burning off into something more resolved. I didn't know who to give it to. But Colton said you're fighting back. My chest tightened. My 17-year-old daughter had been quietly documenting everything for 10 months because some instinct told her it might matter someday. Isla. That took real courage. I said carefully. I need you to do one thing. Screenshot everything and send it to this email address. I gave her Lorraine's secure client intake address. Don't send it from the house Wi-Fi. Use your phone data. Already on my phone data, she said, with a quiet precision that reminded me of myself. After she hung up, I sat at the desk for a long time. 2 days later, Lorraine called with something else entirely. She'd received, through a contact at the county recorder's office, a flag notification. Someone had attempted to access the deed on my property to initiate a quitclaim transfer. The attempt had been blocked by Arlene, but the timing and the method pointed directly to Phillips' involvement. He was trying to accelerate the transfer of my home before the legal process could stop him. He was in a hurry. Hurry was the enemy of precision. I'd learned that lesson years ago. People in a hurry made mistakes. Boyd called that evening to add one more piece. Tara Whitlock, the other woman Phillips was seeing while her husband served overseas, had been asking quiet questions in a local military spouses group about Phillips' background. She was starting to have doubts of her own. She just didn't have anyone to confirm them yet. The moment for that conversation was getting close. The thing about coordinated attacks is that they're designed to overwhelm you. Hit enough pressure points simultaneously, and even a disciplined man starts making reactive decisions instead of strategic ones. That's the theory, anyway. What Naomi and Phillips apparently hadn't accounted for was that I'd spent 2 decades training specifically for that scenario. 3 things hit me in the same 48-hour window, and I want to walk through each one carefully because the sequence matters. The first was the anonymous complaint filed with Naval Station Norfolk's Family Readiness Office, alleging that I had returned from deployment in a psychologically compromised state and was engaging in erratic and threatening behavior toward my family. The complaint was unsigned. It called for a welfare check and a formal fitness evaluation before I could resume any parental contact. My commanding officer, Captain Dale Reeves, called me personally rather than routing it through channels. He'd known me for 11 years. His tone was careful but direct. I'm required to flag this, Curtis, he said. But I want you to know I'm looking at this complaint, and I'm seeing the fingerprints of someone who knows how to use the system as a weapon. I appreciate that, sir, I said. I'll cooperate fully with any evaluation. I know you will. That's not what concerns me. What concerns me is who filed this and why. After the call, I sat with the complaint document Lorraine had obtained and read it twice. The language was specific in places, too specific for someone guessing. It referenced the timing of my return, the legal actions I'd taken, even the hotel I was staying at. Someone had provided details. The question was whether it was Derek or Naomi herself. Boyd ran the document's metadata that afternoon. The file had been created on a laptop registered to a Wi-Fi network associated with Phillips' Chesapeake condo. Phillips had filed it himself. He hadn't even bothered to route it through Naomi. The second hit came from Colton School District. Isla's counselor had submitted a formal referral to Child Protective Services, citing concerns about parental conflict and a potentially unsafe home environment linked to the father's return. The referral had been prompted by a conversation the counselor had with Naomi, who had apparently described my behavior as volatile and unpredictable. Lorraine moved on that within hours, filing a motion for an independent psychological evaluation of both parents and requesting that CPS conduct their assessment with full access to both households. That last part was strategic. Naomi couldn't argue against an independent evaluation without looking like she had something to hide. The third hit was the one that revealed how far ahead Phillips had been planning. Boyd called me that evening with something he'd pulled from a county property listing database. The house, my house, the one with Lorraine's lien on it, had been listed 3 weeks before I landed stateside. Not on the public MLS. On a private off-market network used by investors and developers. The listing had gone up while I was still deployed, while my name was still on the deed, while the ink on my travel orders was barely dry. Phillips had posted my house for sale before I even knew my marriage was over. I drove past the house that night. Not to stop, not to confront anyone, just to look at it from the street. The lights were on. Phillips' Audi sat in my driveway, like it had always been there. The front door had a new handle I didn't recognize. I drove back to the hotel, called Lorraine, and told her to file the emergency injunction to block the property sale first thing in the morning. Already drafted, she said. I'll have it on the judge's desk at 8. I hung up and sat at the desk. 3 coordinated attacks. 1 week. All of them running simultaneously, all designed to destabilize me before the legal process could run its course. The complaint to the Navy, the CPS referral, the property listing, none of them were spontaneous. This had been planned out in advance, probably months ago. Phillips was organized. I'd given that much. But organized people left trails. And I was very, very good at following them. Tara Whitlock reached out to me first. I don't know exactly how she found me. Boyd thought she might have cross-referenced names from the military spouses group, where she'd been quietly asking about Phillips. However she managed it, she sent a short, carefully worded message to an email address I'd set up for exactly this kind of contact. I think we may be dealing with the same problem. I'd like to talk if you're willing. We met at a coffee shop in Suffolk on a Wednesday morning. Neutral ground, public, unremarkable. Tara was compact and dark-haired, with the kind of controlled composure you see in people who are holding themselves together through sheer determination. Her husband, Ray, was 18 months into a rotation. She'd met Phillips at a military family financial planning seminar 8 months ago. He came recommended, she said, both hands around her mug. He knew the right language, the right concerns. He understood what it was like to manage everything alone while your spouse was overseas. She paused. He was very good at understanding. He's at practice, I said. I laid out what Boyd had found, the prior contractors, the billing fraud, the pattern of targeting military families. I showed her the documentation on the property listing, the fake Instagram performance, the coordinated legal attacks. I watched her absorb it piece by piece, the way someone processes information that confirms what they'd suspected but hadn't wanted to believe. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. My name is on a financial document I signed 2 months ago, she said finally. He told me it was a joint investment vehicle, a way to grow the savings while Ray was gone. I didn't have an attorney review it. Do you have a copy? She pulled a folded paper from her bag and slid it across the table. I photographed it and sent it directly to Lorraine. You need your own attorney, I told her. Today, not tomorrow. And you need to tell Ray. I know. She looked out the window. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that I was just lonely and reading into things. Her jaw tightened. He told me Ray probably wouldn't understand, that men like Ray, military men, tended to overreact to things that were perfectly innocent. That was the tell. That's always the tell with men like Phillips. They preemptively undermine the husband before he can arrive to ask questions. Ray's going to understand exactly what happened, I said. And so will a judge. Boyd had located a secure way to get a message to Ray Whitlock through official channels, and I'd already set that in motion before the meeting. Ray deserved to know, same as I deserved to know. The fact that nobody had told me was exactly why I was making sure someone told him. After Tara left, I stayed at the table for a while and thought about the shape of what we were building. 2 complainants, financial documentation across multiple victims, a prior record of misconduct, a property listing that proved premeditation, a CPS referral traced back to Phillips' own initiative. A fitness complaint filed from his personal laptop. Lorraine called as I was walking back to my car. The emergency injunction was granted this morning, she said. The property listing has been pulled. No sale, no transfer, nothing moves without a court order. Good, I said. There's something else. The CPS evaluation came back. The investigator spoke with both children. Isla told the evaluator, unprompted, that her home environment had been tense since Phillips began spending time there, and that she felt more comfortable with her father. A brief pause. The referral has been closed as unsubstantiated. And Curtis, the evaluator, noted in her report that the referral appeared to have been made with the intent to influence custody proceedings rather than out of genuine concern. I stopped walking. That goes on record. It goes on record, Lorraine confirmed. And it follows Naomi's attorney into every room he walks into from here on. I stood in the parking lot with the phone at my side for a moment, watching the traffic move past on the highway. One by one, the pieces Phillips had set up are being disassembled. Not with noise, not with drama, with documentation, timing, and the kind of patience that comes from knowing exactly what you're doing. He'd picked the wrong man to go to war with. The answer to the fitness complaint came back clean, as I knew it would. The Navy's independent examiner spent 90 minutes with me, ran through the standard battery of evaluations, and filed a report that described me as psychologically fit, operationally grounded, and showing no indicators of instability. The complaint was formally closed and flagged as unsubstantiated. What came next, I hadn't fully anticipated. Captain Reeves called me 2 days after the evaluation cleared. His voice carried something measured and deliberate in it, the tone of a man delivering information he'd spent time deciding how to frame. Harrington, he said, I've been doing some digging on your last deployment extension, the one that added 7 weeks to your rotation. I sat up straighter. What did you find, sir? The request originated through a family liaison administrative channel, a process that allows family members to submit requests for extension consideration under specific hardship provisions. The stated reason was that the service member had requested additional time to complete mission objectives and had indicated he was not ready to return. He paused. The problem is that the form references conversations with you that, according to every communication log we have, never took place. The room went quiet around me. Someone submitted a false administrative request in my name, I said. That's what the evidence suggests. The form was submitted digitally. We're pulling the access records. Another pause. Curtis, if this traces back to a civilian actor who deliberately interfered with a service member's deployment timeline using fraudulent administrative documents, we're talking about federal territory. After the call, I forwarded everything to Lorraine and then called Boyd. I need you to cross-reference the extension request submission date with Phillips' digital activity, I said. Same approach as the fitness complaint. Boyd called back in 4 hours. The submission had been made from a device using the same network signature as Phillips' condo. The timestamp put it at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, 3 months into my deployment. The same week, Boyd noted that Naomi had withdrawn $4,000 in cash from our joint account. Wade Phillips had deliberately extended my deployment by 7 weeks. He'd bought himself nearly 2 months of additional unobstructed access to my family, my home, and my wife, using forged documents submitted through a federal military channel. That crossed a line that went well beyond divorce proceedings. Lorraine was quiet for a long moment when I told her. Then, I'm contacting the U.S. Attorney's Office today. This is wire fraud and obstruction at the federal level. Phillips just handed us something that no family court judge can touch. This goes above all of it. That evening, I drove to Derek's apartment. I didn't call ahead. I knocked twice and waited. When he opened the door, the look on his face told me he already knew why I was there. He stepped back automatically, which was answer enough. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I walked in, stood in the middle of his living room, and laid out exactly what I knew. The 2 tests, the timeline, the filings that match what I'd told only him. I watched him try to find a version of events that let him off the hook and come up empty. She called me, he said finally, after you deployed. She said she was scared, that you'd been different before you left, that she was worried about you. She asked me to keep her informed. He looked at the floor. I thought I was helping. You thought you were helping, I repeated. You handed information about my legal strategy to the woman who's trying to take my house, my kids, and as much of my money as possible. And she handed it to the man who forged federal documents to keep me overseas longer. I let that sit for a full 5 seconds. That's what your help accomplished, Derek. He had nothing to say to that. There was nothing to say. I left without another word and drove back to the hotel through the dark streets of Virginia Beach. I thought about 20 years of friendship and what it was worth when it came apart under pressure. Not much, as it turned out. Some things you found out about people only when the conditions were right. And once you found out, you couldn't unfind it. Colton called that night late. His voice was quieter than usual, stripped of the defensive edge he'd been carrying since I'd come back. "Dad," he said, "I want to enlist. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and Mom's been trying to talk me out of it. She says it destroys families." A pause. I told her I'd already watched something destroy ours, and it wasn't the Navy. I sat with that for a moment. "That's your call to make, Colton. Not hers. Not mine." "I know," he said. "I just wanted you to know I'm not backing down from it." "Good," I said. "Don't." The meeting was held in a 12th-floor conference room at Lorraine's firm on a gray Tuesday morning in December. I arrived 20 minutes early. Lorraine was already there, along with a federal prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office named Caldwell and a woman from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service who introduced herself simply as Agent Hara. Naomi arrived with her attorney, Raymond Bolt, who looked like a man who'd been told he was walking into a negotiation and was only now realizing he'd walked into something else entirely. Phillips arrived separately, with 2 attorneys from a downtown firm whose body language made clear they'd been briefed to expect trouble. I sat across the table and let Lorraine run it. She opened by distributing folders, one to each party. Inside, the metadata analysis linking the fitness complaint to Phillips' network. The property listing pulled from the off-market database, timestamped 3 weeks before my return. The forensic accounting showing $4,700 in unauthorized transfers out of joint accounts. And at the back, the federal filing on the deployment extension, the forged administrative request, the access logs, the digital signature traced directly to Phillips' device. The room went still in the particular way rooms go still when people realize the ground has shifted completely beneath them. Phillips' lead attorney leaned toward his client and murmured something. Phillips kept his face neutral, but his left hand, resting on the table, pressed flat against the surface in a way that told me his composure was costing him significant effort. Naomi was looking at the deployment extension document. I watched her read it. I watched the moment she understood what it meant. That the man sitting 3 chairs away from her had deliberately falsified federal paperwork to keep her husband overseas longer. Her face didn't collapse. It went very still, which was almost worse. "Mrs. Stringer," Agent Hara said calmly, "we'd like to discuss what you knew about the administrative request submitted on your husband's behalf during his last deployment." Bolt started to object. Naomi put her hand up and stopped him. "I didn't know about that," she said. Her voice was flat and precise. She looked at Phillips. "I didn't know about that." Phillips said nothing. What followed over the next 2 hours was the controlled, methodical dismantling of everything he'd built. His attorneys negotiated where they could and conceded where they had no choice. The property was taken entirely off the market. The financial transfers were reversed through court order. The LLC holding company associated with the off-market listing was flagged for federal audit. On the custody matter, Lorraine presented Islaw's 10 months of documented notes, the CPS report that had cited Naomi's referral as an apparent attempt to influence proceedings, and Boyd's full surveillance record. The outcome was straightforward. Joint legal custody, primary physical residence with me for the school year. Naomi's parenting time structured around a schedule that the children themselves had input into. Bolt tried twice to introduce the fitness complaint as a character point. Both times, Agent Hara quietly noted that the complaint had been traced to Phillips' device and filed into the federal record accordingly. The second time, Bolt didn't try a third. When it was over and the room was emptying, Naomi lingered while her attorney gathered his files. Phillips had already left, quickly, with his attorneys flanking him, not making eye contact with anyone. She looked older than the last time I'd seen her. Not in years, in something harder to name. Like certain things had been stripped away and hadn't been replaced yet. "The Instagram account," she said. "The fundraisers. I want you to know I actually believed I was helping people." "I know," I said. "You believed a lot of things that weren't true." She absorbed that without flinching. The kids, they'll be okay. They'll be better than okay, I said. They already are. I picked up my copy of the settlement documents, nodded once to Lorraine, and walked out into the December cold. The harbor was slate gray and flat. A Navy vessel was moving toward open water in the distance, running lights faint in the morning overcast. I watched it for a moment, then turned toward the parking garage and walked. The federal case against Wade Phillips moved faster than most people expected, but not faster than it deserved to. The U.S. Attorney's Office filed charges in January: wire fraud, obstruction of a federal administrative process, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud across multiple victims. The deployment extension forgery was the centerpiece, but Lorraine and the federal prosecutor had built a structure around it that held in every direction. Tara Whitlock's attorney had formally joined the case as a secondary complainant. The LLC holding company had been audited and found to contain funds traceable to 3 separate victims across 2 states. Phillips' attorneys attempted a negotiated plea in the first week. The offer was rejected. The prosecution wasn't interested in quiet. Boyd called me on Thursday afternoon in late January with the kind of tone that meant he had something worth sitting down for. "Ray Whitlock is back stateside," he said. "Got an emergency leave authorization once the federal case was filed and his name appeared in the discovery documents. He's been briefed on everything." A pause. "He asked me to pass along a message to you." "What's the message?" He said, "Tell Stringer I owe him one. And I don't forget debts." I didn't say anything for a moment. I thought about Ray somewhere overseas, carrying the weight of not knowing, the same weight I'd carried. The fact that he'd come back in time to deal with it on his own terms, that mattered. "Tell him we're even," I said. "I just did what I want someone to do for me." The children had adjusted with the particular resilience that kids show when the adults around them finally stop performing and start being honest. Eslaw had moved her things into the larger bedroom of my house, the one that looked out over the backyard where I'd set up a proper training space for Colton on his visits home. She'd also, quietly and without announcing it, deleted Naomi's Instagram account by contacting the platform directly and flagging the military donation posts as fraudulent solicitation. The account was removed within 48 hours. Naomi didn't contest it. Colton had made his decision official. He'd submitted his enlistment paperwork the second week of January, listing his desired branch as the Navy. His recruiter called me to confirm family contact information, standard procedure, and mentioned that Colton had listed me as his primary motivation. I kept that to myself and let him have it as his own. Naomi and I had exactly 2 conversations after the December conference room settlement. The first was logistical, school schedules, medical decisions, the practical architecture of co-parenting across 2 households. She was precise and businesslike, and I matched her register without difficulty. The second was shorter. She called on a Sunday evening and said simply that she was starting therapy and that she thought it was important I knew that. I told her I thought that was the right call. That was the extent of it. Derek Marsh had tried to reach me twice by text and once by voicemail. I hadn't responded. 20 years of friendship had a weight to it, and I felt that weight, but feeling the weight of something and deciding to carry it again were 2 different things. Some doors, once closed, stayed closed, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. In February, Lorraine called with the final resolution on the property. The house had been fully secured under my name. The off-market listing was permanently expunged. Phillips LLC had been dissolved by court order. The $19,000 in unauthorized transfers had been fully restored to the joint account prior to our final division of assets, which meant I'd recovered every cent he'd tried to siphon before disappearing. "He's looking at 7 to 10 years, Lorraine said. "The prosecution has 2 additional victims who've come forward since the filing. His attorneys are scrambling." "Good," I said. "Curtis." Her voice shifted. Less attorney, more human. For what it's worth, in 20 years of family law I've handled maybe 4 cases where the husband was as thoroughly prepared as you were. Most men in your position don't survive this intact. Most men in my position haven't spent 20 years being told that preparation is the difference between coming home and not, I replied. She laughed once, dry and genuine. Fair enough. Spring came to Virginia Beach the way it always does, tentatively at first, then all at once, the forsythia going yellow along the fence lines, and the harbor losing its winter flatness and showing some color again. I was running my usual route along the waterfront on a Saturday morning in March, when my phone buzzed in my vest pocket. I slowed to a walk and checked it. A text from Colton. Past everything. Ship date confirmed. August 14th. I stopped on the path and read it twice. Then I typed back. Proud of you. Call me tonight. 3 seconds later. Already planned on it. I put the phone away and kept walking, hands in my pockets, the harbor moving gray-green to my left. I thought about the morning I'd landed at Norfolk and read Naomi's text on the tarmac, the cold certainty that had settled into me in the place where the shock should have been. I thought about the 2 words I typed back and what they'd set in motion. I didn't regret any of it. Not the methods, not the pace, not the decisions made in hotel rooms late at night with a legal pad and a bad cup of coffee. The only thing I regretted was the years I'd spent not seeing clearly enough, the conversations I'd let go, the silences I'd accepted as normal, the slow erosion I'd attributed to distance and deployment instead of choice. That regret was useful. I intended to keep it as long as it stayed that way. Isla had a swim meet that afternoon, her first varsity competition of the spring season. I was in the bleachers before warm-ups started, which she noticed and pretended not to. She swam the 200 freestyle with the focused aggression of someone who had things to prove, finished second in her heat, and looked up at me from the pool with an expression that was trying hard not to be proud of itself. I gave her a nod. She rolled her eyes and grinned. After the meet, we stopped for food at a place near the beach that had been there since before she was born, the kind of diner that doesn't change the menu because it doesn't need to. We sat in a corner booth and ate burgers and talked about school and the upcoming season and her plans for the summer. Normal conversation, the kind that had been hard to access for a long time. Dad, she said, halfway through her fries, do you think Mom's going to be okay? I considered the question seriously, the way she deserved. I think she's doing the work to get there, I said. That's the best any of us can do. Isla nodded, turning a fry between her fingers. I'm not angry at her anymore. I was for a long time. I don't think I have the energy for it now. That's not a bad place to land, I said. She looked at me across the table with those eyes that had always been a little older than her age. Are you okay? Like actually, not just saying it. I thought about that honestly. About the hotel rooms and the legal pads and the late-night calls with Lorraine. About Derek's voicemails sitting unanswered. About the vessel I'd watched move out of the harbor on the morning after the conference room meeting. About what it meant to be back in a place without having a mission to execute. Getting there, I said, yeah. She seemed to accept that as the honest answer it was, which was the thing about Isla. She always knew the difference. Outside, the March light was doing something particular over the water, going gold at the edges the way it did in the hour before sunset, the harbor catching it and throwing it back warm. I drove home with the window down and the cold air moving through the car. My house was quiet when I got back, the solid, comfortable quiet of a place that was actually mine. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and looked out at the yard where the first grass of spring was coming in along the fence line. I'd come home from harder things than this, but this one had required a different kind of strength, the kind that doesn't make the highlight reel, that doesn't get a citation or a commendation, the kind that just holds the line, day after day, until the line holds itself. The coffee was good. The yard was green. Down the hall, Isla's backpack was dropped by the door the way she always dropped it, like the concept of coat hooks was personally offensive to her. I sat with all of it for a while. Then I picked up my phone and called my son.